Is it showing something? Because it says it's live. So huh? Yeah, but it already started. Okay, welcome everybody. So we're still trying to learn how the whole application works, for the live cast. But for the people who are attending right now live, I would like to recommend that you have your comments posted, so we can be useful to you and the session is going to be successful. Because our goal is to give you as much information as possible about the COZYROC product. Of course, nothing is going to be perfect. This is technology, and it is a learning experience for us. But some of my colleagues told me that this type of events, it's called Ask Me Anything, and that's what we want it to be. So we would like to have a good discussion and good information provided for you that is going to help you be productive. So I have my demo screen set up here. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what we are going to be dealing with in this type of demonstrations. So as people already know, we have a product included an entire engine for data ingestion. It is a REST framework. It is built from the ground up. It was first introduced in 2017, and we believe this is going to be the future for many more applications to be included in the future. The platform, it is very flexible, and I just wanted to give you an intro so you can get your feet wet. So the REST framework, it's built of the so-called, we have the platform, which is the engine, and then we have a configuration which is driving this engine, and the configuration is consisting of two elements. It is an XML schema, and it is JavaScript. So the XML schema is giving a structure for your configuration. So you have definitions for your authentication, you have definition for your resources that you're going to be dealing with, and then of course there are many other additional features that make the engine to be really useful. For example, certain REST services have the so-called dynamic metadata, which means that you cannot just hard code your resources. They have to be dynamically retrieved from certain endpoints and then shown to the user so he can navigate these resources, and then for each resource you can also get dynamically the available fields for each resource. And also the configuration has the authentication part. What I think is really important to understand is that because the different vendors who provide their REST applications, they they do not follow a specific layout or specific method for exposing the data of their particular application or service. So in order for this data to be standardized, to be available for use inside SSIS, this data has to be transformed to appear in a certain way. So it needs to be tabular, and of course you can also have as many complex or what we call composite structures included inside a specific payload. So that's where the JavaScript engine comes. It is very powerful because you can massage the data that you're retrieving from the web service, and you can transform into a shape that is going to be useful for your particular project to make it available inside SSIS. And also, of course, the JavaScript engine is very useful when you have to build a specific authentication for different REST applications, because different REST applications, they have different requirements, some in terms of how they connect, some actually do very simple so-called API key type of authentication, and that does not require any customization or coding. But then you have the so-called OAuth 2 type of authentications, which requires the so-called three-legged type of authorization, where a customer enters his username, password, and then he is asked by the application that whether he permits the COZYROC application to access his data using these scopes, and then only if the customer approves that, the three-legged process is going to generate the so-called authorization code that is going to be used to get the access token and also the so-called refresh token. So where the access token and refresh token comes is that the access token is short-lived type of access artifact with limited lifetime. Usually they set this lifetime to 1 hour or 3600 seconds. And after the expiration of this access token, or right before it expires, it needs to be replaced for another access token, and that's where the refresh token comes into play. So all these details are, of course, handled for the most part by the engine, but the configuration gives you that flexibility which allows you to connect to any type of system. So let me see whether there are questions asked by people regarding the product, and see whether I can answer your questions. So far I don't see any questions posted by people. Let me see if we have live attendees. Yes, so it appears that there are people watching. I would like to encourage everybody to participate. This is going to be really nice if more people are participating in this event. So in this way, it is going to be useful for your particular project that you're creating, or you might be able to learn something new. So in the meantime, okay, so Ross Zimmerman is asking if we are starting soon. So let me see. Started. So I'm not sure, what's the issue here with the let's try this video, whether it is going to work. Okay, so I think that it finally started to work. I'm really sorry about that, but it appears that LinkedIn does not have a very good process of handling the streams, and so there is it created a brand new post. LinkedIn has created a new video link. Okay. No. So while the people are trying to get to the other link, I'm going to continue speaking, so we are not wasting time. So so the REST framework. The REST framework is built from the ground up, and as I said, it consists of these two elements, the XML and the JavaScript. And the XML file for the configurations that you see can be actually found inside a specific folder. So I want to show you that list of configurations. So all these configurations that you are seeing here are actually these applications. These are actually sitting as XML type files on your system. So if you go to, by default, the location is C, program files x86, COZYROC, SSIS, REST. So everything that you see here is coming. It's actually what's presented in the REST Connection Manager. These are all the configurations for the different applications. Now, this format, this XML format, this format is it's following a specific XML style sheet, and the style sheet file is also in the same folder as the configuration files. So if you examine the same folder under program files x86, COZYROC, SSIS, REST, you have a file which is called rcm-config-1.0. So this is the style sheet for the configuration file. And of course, this is for people who are advanced, but I just wanted to give you an idea. If you are handy and you're programmatically inclined, you can actually build okay, it is going to be So what you're seeing here is, of course, for people who would like to start coding their own configurations, and if you're a very advanced user, that's what I would recommend. But of course, you know, if you are just starting, what we offer for beginner users is also something really nice. You can start creating your own configurations using the REST Connection Manager. So we have the so-called custom selection, and what this custom selection allows you is to okay, Gary is asking a question, so I'm going to try to respond. So you don't need to learn the XML, you can use the UI for that. Let me show. So the REST Connection Manager has very handy UI for you to be able to work on a configuration for a specific service, and you don't have to necessarily know anything about the schema or the XML. So when you initially open the custom dialog, so let me show you again how I did open it. So I selected custom and I selected the range here. You are presented with an option to pick either from scratch or to use other methods to start your configuration. So we support currently the Open API, the WSDL, which is a SOAP specification, GraphQL template, or OData template. So these are templates for you to start, and the list that you see here are for services that we call experimental. And why are they experimental? Is because they have only the authentication part defined and no resource definition. So if you want to use one of these services, you can use this as your template, and then you can start to create your own resources, and this is going to be essentially giving a head start for you to be able to work with these services. But let's say I would like to use from scratch, you know. So when I select scratch, I'm going to be presented with a dialog where I can provide basic parameters for connecting to a service. So I can provide the service name, then we have to provide how we connect to this service. So this is going to be something that is going to be presented to the user in the REST Connection Manager. So we have to provide a base address for your REST service, REST API. Then what will be the next step is usually you can create your own authentication for the service. So we out of the box provide again different templates for different authentication schemes. So this is again simplifying the experience for you. So you can use this as a starting point for your definition. So let's say my API has a very simple API key type of authentication, and it, as you can see, it is already defined everything for you. So if you want to see what the XML looks like for your definition, so you have the API key up as a parameter for your authentication, and then this API key is directly inserted as a parameter in the so-called parameter section. And of course this bearer is not necessarily needed. I'm going to remove it. So what you are seeing here is interesting. Now this syntax that you see here is a special syntax for you to start using JavaScript code inside your definitions. So what this expression says is that I would like to get access to the connection object, which is actually this configuration. Then I would like to get access to the user parameter, so this is a second object here. And then from the user parameter object I would like to get access to the API key. So this API key is actually what the user specifies here as a parameter. So let me just give you an example what it's going to our engine is going to do when you do the when you create such type of authentication. So everything that you see here you can experiment and see what the engine does by using the Fedora application. We have information on our website posted what you need to do to make it useful. You have to enable the HTTPS decryption, otherwise you cannot do tracing of HTTPS protected type of payloads. But let's say this one is already configured on my machine, but let me show you what the authorization is going to look like when I try to press the test connection. So I'm going to put arbitrary number here, and then if I press test connection, okay, so it's complaining no endpoint is configured to test the connectivity. And why is that? I have to go back here and I have to provide URL that is going to test the connectivity to the service. So let's try again. Let's do test connection. Of course there is no such thing as myservice.com, but let's see what is going to happen as a result of this request. So it is still trying to connect and it is eventually going to fail, but you can see what the request looks like here. So it's still waiting. Okay, so it failed eventually. Okay, let's see whether I can see the request itself. Okay, it didn't work. Let me try without HTTPS. Let's do this one. Let's do HTTP. So this time it worked. Okay, so as you can see, it is sending a request to the base URL and then the /me, which is my test endpoint, and it is trying to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as authorization. So this is what I defined inside the configuration. So if we go back here, you can see that's what it's my definition for the authentication. It is going to get the API key and then it is going to supply it as a parameter for the request, and it is going to supply it as HTTP header. Let's say that the API key should not be appearing as a header. Let's say I would like this to be defined as a query parameter. So if we go to authorization, I can say this needs to be instead used as a query string parameter to do the authentication part. So let's see how it changes with this change. So if you go now, we can see that it changed the authorization to happen as a query string parameter. So that's the effect of me modifying the parameter type from HTTP header to query string. Let's go back here. I want to show one more thing that it's important, I think. So this is going to be back again to HTTP header. So for the user parameters, I would like to make sure that this API key does not show my selection. So instead of having this parameter to be regular, I want to change it to password. So in this way, as you can see now, the content of the key is no longer visible to the user. So there are certain parameters that make sense to be visible, and passwords or API keys should not be visible. So let me go back to the comment section and see if people have questions or if you like what you're seeing so far, and what direction I mean, go ahead, you know, we can ask your questions. Okay, so Gary has a really advanced question regarding how do you use the certificate type of authentication. So let me try to show. We actually have a template for that. So you saw the API key. So we have the so-called there are actually two, I think two separate type of certificate type of hash. So let's check first the OAuth one. So let's see what's the definition for the OAuth one authentication. So you can see this authentication is actually pretty complex. I mean, if you try to do this on your own, it is not going to be so easy. Consumer key, consumer secret. Okay. Just see whether this is the right one with the certificate. So as you can see now that I have two authentications defined, now we get a selector for which authentication we would like to use with the service. Okay, OAuth, yes. So I guess OAuth one is not the it is still using certificates, but I'm not sure. I might be mistaken. Let me check one more. So let's go back to authentications and let's try OAuth 2, let's say Google Service Account. So this one is an interesting one. So the Google Service Account is definitely using a certificate. So the key file needs to be in P12, or this is actually PFX format. And again, you can see that the way it works, it's using JavaScript. So all this Google create assertion, for example, and this type of parameters are actually coming from a JavaScript code with reusable scripts. So let's go back again to the main dialog, and you can see what is going to be now presented. So I have now created authentication for a Google Service account, and here I have to provide a PFX certificate file. So, and other parameters required by this particular authentication. But let me show you where is the definition for the Google create assertion. So if you go back to the connection manager and select here XML, you can see that there is a reference to the google.js. So this file sits again on your system, and it contains the reusable script for dealing with Google Service Account certificate authentication. So let's see where is this file actually on your system. So if we open the COZYROC SSIS REST folder and go back to JavaScript, there is a folder called JS, this is the folder with all the reusable scripts available for you to use in your solutions. So you can see there is a Google.js, and this is the definition for the Google create assertion function. So this is completely JavaScript, and it is going to prepare the correct payload signed with the certificate using the correct algorithm. So let's scroll down. So you have another create assertion, which is coming from auth2j. So we have another reusable script that is being referenced, and here you can see what it looks like. So all of this coding is done behind the scenes by us, and you can just reuse it in your projects, you know, as a way to create authentications. So it is not a lot of code, and that's what it's the beauty of the JavaScript. You know, the JavaScript is not supposed to be used to create gigantic type of libraries, but when used properly, it can actually deliver a lot of flexibility with a very little coding required. Of course, now as you can see, it's kind of interesting. Now this type, the live cast, there is a somewhat of a delay. So that's why I was hoping that by having the questions in advance, we can have more, how to say, action-packed type of event. But most probably, you know, this might happen the next time, you know, if people are really curious, you know, how to get started with their projects. You know, this is something that I'm definitely want people to understand better, you know, how to make this whole thing work for you. But yeah, I mean, we spent considerable time trying to polish, you know, this. What you're seeing actually is the result of the past 8 years of polishing and improvements. Even the initial version was very powerful at the time, 2017, but it didn't have, for example, the user interface that you can for example use now to create configurations. But still, it was the idea with this REST framework is that you're completely abstracted from the SSIS API. So let's say if you have to do a connectivity to a particular application, you don't need to be an SSIS developer. What you need is to have JavaScript knowledge and understanding of how the different REST services work. And the idea is that you can even get a person who is doing JavaScript or web applications, and he can be very quickly productive using this type of framework and provide connectivity to different systems. Let me show you one more for a good example why the Google Sheets API is a good example of why having a very good engine, programming engine, is important. So the Google Sheets API, if you want to extract data from a sheet, it is returning the data in a format that is very compact. Okay, Alex is. Let me just complete with this. So it's returning the data in a way that is compact but not necessarily usable. So if you have to do data pulling from a Google Sheet, you have to do some additional programming to make the data usable in any other system that you like to use. For example, there is no such thing as column names, so we have to mimic or create virtual column names based, for example, on the first row from where you're pulling data from a Google Sheet. So if you are curious, for example, to understand how the Google Sheets works behind the scenes, the API, that's something that I would recommend. Is actually quite involved. There is a lot of code, JavaScript code, nothing complicated, but if you're curious about advanced type of transformations needed to get data in and out of a system, the Google Sheets configuration is a good example. So we have a question from Ross. Ross is asking, is there a way to connect to a CRM 365 service and have access to the custom object definitions for interacting with CRM via an object? Okay, so the CRM 365, they have now the support for this service is now done through the so-called Microsoft Dataverse. So this is the configuration that is going to be used for connecting to Dynamics 365 CRM. So let's see, for example, what is the implementation for as you can see here, we have this type of API is actually what I mentioned earlier, the so-called dynamic metadata API, meaning that the resources are not hard-coded, they are not statically defined, they are dynamic. So for example, to get the list of the available Dataverse resources, aka CRM 365, we have created a function, Dataverse get resources. So this function is going to issue a request. It's going to issue a request to the so-called entity definitions URL. Entity definitions URL, and it is going to select these are the columns that needs to be selected from this Dataverse resource. It is going to be entity set name, logical name, primary ID. So this is the column that is going to be the key column, and then the privileges. This is important for the permissions, so we know, for example, which resource has the permission to be read, to be updated, created, deleted, and so forth. So yeah, this is how we are pulling the data for the data from the Dataverse. Now, from what I trying to understand, most probably Ross does not have necessarily the need for to use this pre-made list of resources. So what Ross is interested is actually to get the definition. So he most probably wants to be able to select a resource which can give you back the entity definitions, meaning the metadata. And from what I'm seeing so far, we don't have access to the entity definitions endpoint at the moment. So, but this is actually a very good idea to include as a separate resource, because I can imagine that a person might need to get this metadata and then probably do some kind of analysis to see whether there is a difference in the list of available entities, and then so for this is for pulling the resources. But let's see what, for example, we have also we have to have a way to pull the available data fields for an entity. So again, this is done as a function inside the inside the Dataverse configuration, and let's see what is the implementation. So again, it is going to use the entity definitions. It is going to use the selected resource name, logical name here as a parameter, and then it is going to use the so-called attributes. So again, this is something that is dealing with the metadata, and it is something that currently it's not provided as a separate resource. So I think it is a very good idea to have this available as metadata that people can use in their projects, because this metadata can be used to detect conflicts. For example, if a certain, even before the package execution starts, this metadata can be used to find out, for example, if certain attributes are still available, and if not, then you can probably fail the package execution, because this might be required attributes. So thank you for asking this question, Ross. It's actually useful, you know, just having the discussion shows that there are certain things that we can still include in the pre-made configurations. Okay, so I'm still looking to hear from more people with questions. You know, in the meantime, what I was going to tell you about is about the REST configuration. So yes, this is something you might also find fascinating, is that even though it is called a REST framework, the REST framework itself, REST is usually meant to mean that the exchange between the client, meaning the COZYROC REST framework, and the service needs to happen in JSON. However, that is not necessarily the case with certain services. Certain services are using XML to work with data. So this means that in order for the REST framework to be able to deal with such services, we have to somehow have the ability to deal with XML type of structures inside JavaScript. And what is actually interesting is that the way we have approached this problem is that for everything that the REST framework is dealing, it is always about the JSON, because the JSON is actually the natural format for dealing with data inside JavaScript. So if you have to deal with XML, we provide out of the box functionality for you to construct XML payloads out of JSON, or send or receive XML payloads using, again, in a JSON format. For if, let's say, the system sends back data in XML format, the engine is going to automatically translate these XML structures into a JSON format. So when you're creating transformations in JavaScript, you're not going to be dealing with XML. It is to you. It is everything is going to be appear as a JSON objects, which is really nice. And we want to mention that we are extensively using in the reusable scripts a library which is called underscore. It is really powerful because out of the box JavaScript doesn't have very good primitives or functionality for working with arrays and objects and doing transformations. So if you go to the internet and search for underscore, it is a library that is created primarily for people doing web server implementations, but we have repurposed it to use inside the REST framework. So there is a website called _js.org. I believe that was the name of the project, and you can see that you have plenty of methods available for working with collections, with arrays, with objects, and all this functionality makes it really easy for you to manipulate and transform and to extract specific information that you can then use to create the required result in your particular situation. So learning how to use underscore JS is going to save you a lot of time if you have to do a lot of data massaging. You don't have to do a lot of coding, you just have to start thinking in terms of JSON. And the JSON is pretty well known as a format. Let's see, what is the JSON? Is it JSON? Most probably JSON org. So it is for JSON org. So that's mostly the type of structures that you're going to be dealing when you're using the REST framework. It is JSON, json.org, and this is the short specification for the format. And that's probably one of the reasons why we think that using the JavaScript as the engine was the right decision from the beginning, because there are other companies that are providing similar type of ingestion frameworks, but most of them are based on other systems like Python, and Python is not exactly JSON. JSON is not natural to Python, so you have to use functions in Python to deal with JSON. However, with JavaScript it comes out naturally to work with JSON everywhere. So it is a really powerful combination of having JSON and JavaScript together working to accomplish a result. So do you have other questions that you would like to explore on this session? I'm not sure. I hope that you're going to find this content useful. I really enjoy doing this type of events, especially if we are able to give you ideas about what we can possibly accomplish using our product. Let me ask you. Okay, so there is a question from Gary Furash. I would like to see some sessions on some of the components, how you can script to create dynamic data flows or whatever. That's a very generic question, but what the dynamic data flows are actually providing is something that it's called from other systems that are called metadata driven pipeline. So the idea with the dynamic data flow is that the dynamic data flow it's metadata driven pipeline. So the idea is that you don't have statically defined columns at design time inside SSIS. What you have is you can pull the metadata from the source system at runtime, do the same for the destination, and then the data flow task force inside COZYROC is going to automatically connect the source and destination columns at runtime. So let's say if there is a change inside the source, usually SSIS is going to break the execution because the metadata has changed, and you have to go back in design and modify it. So the data flow task force gives you this ability to deal with changing metadata gracefully without crashing. And so what we did actually recently introduce is also something called creating destination columns based on source column. So let's say if you have a new source column, this this create destination columns is going to create automatically new columns for the new source columns that are coming from the source system. So this is really actually making very powerful, because in this way you don't even need human intervention to start getting new data if new data starts to appear in the source. But again, your question is very generic, so if you can be more precise and say what exactly you're trying to accomplish, then I can probably better answer the questions you have regarding the dynamic data flows. But the question that was asked by Ross, it's actually quite related, because he was asking how do I get the metadata for Dynamics 365. So he's trying, for example, to pull what are the new custom fields in the source system. So using the dynamic data flow, he might not even need to do something with the metadata, because he can create a process where if a new custom field appears in the CRM system, and let's say he would like to do a backup or a copy of this new custom field inside the destination, which might be anything that it's supported inside SSIS. Our new data flow task force starting from version 2.3 is going to be possible to create a new destination column for the new custom column. So I'm not sure whether this is what Ross is trying to accomplish, but I mean, this is something that I would recommend to Ross, to check out, the new functionality for creating destination columns inside database tables, for example, based on the source. So this might be something probably that is going to be a good solution. Just suggesting, I'm not sure whether this is what you're looking for, but it might be worth trying out. Okay, so do you have more questions, or we think that we can wrap this session out for now? I'm just trying to not to waste people's time as much as possible. So if you think that we have plenty of ideas to examine. We can probably end up the session a little bit earlier. You know, it was scheduled to end up in 1 hour, and we are getting very close to this 1 hour soon. What else? We're posting on YouTube channel, Facebook, and Twitter. If you think that this was useful to this type of content is useful, we'll be definitely glad to hear from you, because we can do more of this type of sessions, and if we have enough of questions in advance, then we can be more useful to you. But I would like to thank you for the people who are attending the event, and I'm sorry for the mishap at the beginning. The live URLs did get messed up, and some people missed some of the beginning, you know, but the entire recording is going to be available. I was actually speaking without knowing that there is no broadcasting. You know, it is good idea that I did check my comments, but yes, and you can see what was the initial part. You know, the first 10-15 minutes, it was not a waste. You're not going to be losing the content, so you're definitely going to be able to access the beginning of the presentation. And thank you again for attending the session, and I'm going to end the presentation now. Thank you. Have a good one.